I was kind of naive in the sense that I thought that it doesn't matter who I am. If my argument is strong enough, if my way of communicating is good enough, then people will maybe agree with me. I realized that just the fact, for example, that I'm a woman is already something that is political for some people. When you know that this is possible, that you're going to see this in the comments, there's this sort of survival impulse of like not looking at it. I hate myself sometimes for looking at comments. My way of doing things on YouTube is I don't want to be too pragmatic.
So for those of you who don't know who Alice is a much bigger creator than I am. She's a video essayist on YouTube covering topics mostly related to feminism, but also pop culture, politics, media, capitalism, and muscle mommies occasionally. And she's the author of this book right here, Collapse Feminism, which was just published, and we're definitely going to be talking about that one. Is that a good summary of your YouTube channel? How do you usually explain what you do?
It depends to who I'm talking to, really. To you, I would say that your intro was quite good. I guess, I've been making videos for more than 3 years now. It's always been kind of the same thing, 10 to 20 minutes videos on internet culture, things happening in the news, and I always try to add a little bit of context behind those trends, or like historicize or kind of use them to bring bigger ideas, bigger concepts. So that's always the idea. It's like using the momentum of those trends of news to bring something deeper, to have deeper conversations and kind of educate people as well on like a few concepts that I've learned at uni and that I want to democratize in a way through those YouTube videos.
Can you tell me a bit about your educational background or what kind of work you did before starting your YouTube channel? How did you end up doing this?
I was quite lucky actually because it was kind of a very easy transition from a master's degree, which was in US history. It was very much focused on research. So the idea was to, at the end of that master's degree, either do a PhD or do something else. And in my case, in order to do that PhD, I would have had to do a year of the agrégation, which is like a sort of big examination where they test your knowledge on a given subject. So for me, it would have been English in order to have the ability to teach English. And they kind of wanted us to do that, to have this sort of security. At least we have a job in case the PhD doesn't end well or whatever. But that meant that I would have had to work very intensely for a year. So instead, what I did is that I did like a sort of part-time job. I moved to Ireland, to Galway, and I worked as a French teacher. And that's allowed me to continue working on the channel to the point where it became kind of my job. I've always done something on the side, so either like writing a book or now I have like maybe a cool project that is starting to turn into reality. So I'm always trying to have something on the side as well, but I guess YouTube is my main job, and I didn't do anything like related to journalism or anything. It was always like very focused on research. So that was kind of the direction I was heading towards, let's say.
Yeah, that was kind of, I contacted you originally with this intro that says, I would like to speak to people who are either YouTube journalists or journalism adjacent creators.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you reacted to that when you originally saw it. Like, do you consider what you do to be like somewhere within the realm of journalism?
It's interesting because like some people definitely reach out to me as if like with the journalist label, and others will like kind of not really know what to label. And I guess like I'm not the only one, like we are a bunch of creators online who kind of went from doing their studies to, hey, like having their own sort of media, like running our own channels, etc. And we don't really have any specific label. On a personal level, I don't really know, like in the next few years, if I'm gonna go more towards journalism or if I'm gonna go back to research. So I'm kind of like in the middle, seeing where things go. And even like when you learn about research, the methodology of research, etc., is kind of similar to journalism in some aspects. There are some key differences, of course, but the sort of the idea of like reaching truth and like looking at different sources, etc., is something that is kind of common. So I guess that's why maybe there's this sort of assumption that maybe I'm going in this direction.
Yeah, I guess so. The thought that I have, and it's a debate that kind of comes back. Oftentimes, I feel like it's a conversation that's more common among non-journalists who have this very like restrictive definition of what journalism is, where it's like they look at gossip journalism or like celebrity kind of that like TMZ stuff, and they're like, that's not real journalism. The only real journalists are the Woodward and Bernstein kind of like investigative political reporters. It's like, no, it's all journalism. Like you can say that it has a different value to you, like the kind of journalism that you're talking about, but like all of these jobs, from tabloids to really like what I call like eat your vegetables, very dry journalism that has zero entertainment value at all, up until like, even if you look at the kind of skills that are involved, like a photojournalist is a journalist and a data journalist is a journalist, and there's no overlap whatsoever on what they actually do. So I think video essayist, whether it's you or other similar creators, if you take your script and you sent it, like you let's move like 20 years back when there were still magazines that were in operation in the world, you sent that as a think piece to a magazine, I wouldn't feel that out of place. So I do think that it's just a new form of like one kind of journalism that is going to gain legitimacy over time. And I wonder if that's something that you are like kind of aware of in terms of how you interact with your audience, or what you feel your audience expects from you as a creator.
Yeah, no, totally. Like it's a new medium, and it's a new way of communicating as well. Like it's a different style of communication. Two things come to mind when you talk about that. Is like, one is obviously legitimacy as video essayists in comparison to, as you say, like well-established journalists, and like how we also manage that on an individual level, and then when people reach out to us to work with us, etc., is like this sort of, okay, like I don't really have any legitimacy, but like thank you for noticing my work, and like thank you for giving value to my work, or etc. I guess like even in my book, for example, like I know an issue that some booksellers had when we started to market the book and like promote the book and be like, hey, please. Get it in your library, is the fact that it was on social media. It's very centered on social media, and I try to use social media as like I try to prove that social media can be a valid source to then talk about like bigger ideas, bigger concepts, or to introduce a concept or things like that. I mean, that's what I've been doing for 3 years now. So obviously I wanted to do that with the book as well. And I know that some people are still not kind of ready for this. They still don't find social media, what happens on there, legitimate, or it's more due to the fact that it comes and go, and it feels like, contrary to something like tech, there is less, like weight to it. It's more like, again, like it's trends, etc. So like, what would you write a book, something that is going to stay for a long time on that? And I guess, there's a little bit of truth to that, but generally speaking, the sort of legitimacy aspect is something that is kind of challenging. Can we call ourselves journalists if we don't have a journalism degree? Can we call ourselves journalists if we talk about like celebrities and like internet culture, all those things? And the other thing I wanted to talk about is not coming back, so I'm just gonna.
No worries, it'll come back later.
Take over,
Because what I would say is I'm pretty sure, I would have to look into this more, but I'm pretty sure that when TV started to appear, what at the time was traditional media, which was print and radio, they were very snobbish and elitist about it, and they were like, oh, that's not real journalism, that doesn't have the legitimacy that we have. And I would be curious to see if when radio started to appear, print media had the same approach of like, no, that's not real journalism, only we. And now it's all three of them together saying, oh, YouTube journalism is not real journalism, which is like, it's always, in a few years, there's going to be VR journalism, and that's going to be the thing that YouTube journalists are going to say, like, that's not real journalism, we're like traditional media and whatever. So I just feel every time there's a new adaptation that's going to happen, and until people kind of accept it, and it's going to take a new form. I understand, for example, when you look at streamers who are playing video games while talking about like a war on the other side of the world, that it feels kind of weird. But I don't think it's like that difference from, talk radio from, 20 years ago or whatever. And
true. And I mean, like, if you really think about it, it's like, again, like going back to this idea of different ways of communicating information, like, so, for example, like video essayists, we're more likely to flip into the personal, or use personal experience as, like sort of a foundation to then talk about other things. So that's one thing that, in traditional establishment journalism is not, unless you do like an essay type of thing, or I guess that would be more like okay. But like for us, it's very much part of what we do.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about someone who I think would be like a figure of YouTube journalism, like Johnny Harris, for example. When you look at all his videos, of course they're like very technical videos, etc. But there are also like some more vlog style video, of him talking about like raising his children, traveling with his children, Q&As or things like that. And I feel like that's something kind of new that is also interesting, and maybe that would be one thing that establishment media would look down upon. They sort of they talk about themselves, it's all about them, it's about the sort of influencer culture, but I still feel like it has its power as well. Like being able to connect with people on a personal level also allows us to share things on a, how to say that, to build upon that empathy, that humanity, to then convey ideas that may be more difficult to convey with just facts and knowledge. But again, like I feel like maybe something that is we have to be cautious about is also like what are the credentials as well, like because everything is valued, everything is measured around likes, views, followers. Is that also that is what gives us legitimacy on some aspects? But does that mean that our methodology is great? Does that mean that we're doing things correctly? So there's also this side of this new wave of media, podcast, video essays, etc. that maybe we need to work on a little bit, or be cautious about, or maybe develop methods and techniques and strategies to be as as rigorous, as methodically rigorous as possible.
Yeah, I that's exactly why I'm starting this this series of interviews specifically to ask, like, I don't know if the word content creator is the correct one, to ask YouTube journalists like how they approach their work and how they verify their sources. I don't know if you saw this, but the interview of a Houthi member by leftist streamer Hassan Abi.
I didn't see that yet. I watch his content quite regularly, but I haven't seen it yet. No.
Yeah, well, so there's this Houthi. He says, "Oh, I'm not a Houthi. I'm just like a Yemeni fighting for Palestinian freedom." Who was on board one of the ships that the Houthi took over. Like, posted a TikTok of that, and he was nicknamed Tim Houthi Chalamet because he's handsome and slightly looks like Timothy Chalamet. And Hassan had him on his stream and did an entire interview that was like, oh, what kind of pizza do you like? And have you ever eaten a hamburger? And like, what do you watch One Piece? Because what you're doing is basically what Luffy would do in One Piece and stuff like that. And it's like, yeah, that is what's especially striking is that Hassan and people kind of on his side of the political spectrum constantly talk about the dangers of platforming, whether you want to justify the actions of the Houthis with whatever argument you're using to do that. Like, you need to have that conversation. If you can't just have them on to talk about pizza in One Piece.
Yeah. It's it's tricky, this sort of thing of, also because we're closer to it appears that we're closer to our audience because with comments and everything like that. So on the other hand, it feels like we kind of have the ability to voice the concerns of normal people, where you have like establishment media, etc., where there's this sort of disconnect with real people, influencers, YouTubers, content creators in general. It feels like we're more connected to those people. So there's this sort of flip side where it's like, yeah, but like be careful with the sort of voices that you platform, the sort of information that you share. Like this whole section of YouTube drama, for example, like sometimes like can also amplify some very toxic aspect of, hey, like, check your sources, check what is going on. Don't start this sort of, there have been so many, I'm thinking about like one specific example in France where someone used their platform to, amplify the sort of bullying campaign. So there's always like this sort of responsibility as well that maybe as, I would say, trained journalists would, like, I haven't been trained as a journalist, so I don't know, but I know that there's sort of, hey, like, this is your job, like, you have some responsibility, etc. For us, it's kind of different. It's like people gave us that legitimacy, so it feels as if our voice and our opinions are important, and that our choices will be supported by that audience as well. So it's always good to, like remain accountable and understand that it's not because you have a big following that it means that everything that you say or everything that you do is valid, is legitimate, is good. But I mean, what's great with social media as well is like if you do something wrong, if you say something wrong, or if you whatever that is that you're doing that is wrong, people will tell you. They'll tell you on multiple platforms, cancel you even if they're really, really angry.
Even if you're not wrong, actually.
Oh yeah, true. So I guess that's sort of accountability. But yeah, like I remember like when I started my channel and I started to get attention, gain momentum, etc. There was something that I was kind of struggling with. Is this sort of people, like a huge amount of people coming to you being like, you're amazing, you're so smart, like you're so intelligent, you're wonderful, I love you, whatever. And it's like you cannot help but like build this sort of ego where you're like, oh yeah, I am amazing, I am this, I'm that. And it's just a natural response, like when you get so much compliments, it's normal to start to feel kind of important. So I guess maybe some people, some creators won't do that work of, accountability, assessment of like, hey, like I'm a creator, this legitimacy is given by these people, but what maybe I should ask like more like professionals, etc., what they think about my work, what would they like agree with what I do, would they criticize me, etc. So always being open to criticism coming from various people, I would say.
Can you tell me what you wanted your YouTube channel to be when you started it? How is it different today, and what plans you have for the future?
That's an interesting question. And you know what? I'm very lucky because I think that when I started my channel, the way it is now is exactly what I wanted it to be. Just make those like the idea in obviously like when you start a YouTube channel and you start making videos, like you don't have like a very definite plan of what it's gonna be like, etc. But you still have like some. I'm not gonna lie, I started it as a passion, obviously, as like I'm gonna put videos and like I'm really passionate about those topics, etc. But there was also like this little voice in my head being like, maybe work, maybe it could turn into a career, maybe that could be something that at least like open doors for like new opportunities, etc. And I'm kind of lucky because yeah, like I'm doing exactly what I wanted to do. So like short format, quite short videos, dense, going straight to the point, analyzing concepts, educating people on things that I learned in humanities, so philosophy, sociology, political science, history, all those fields, try to cover that. But also the idea was to bring a wider audience to those concepts, and therefore using, as I said at the beginning, popular trends, using media momentum, to convey those ideas. And the goal for me has always been to reach as many people as possible. And I guess maybe we'll talk about that later, what it implies to want to reach as many people as possible in terms of your opinions, how you share your opinions, what you share, what you don't share, how you regulate your voice and your opinions as well. So I remember that at the very beginning, I was very, very careful with the words I used, not using like too contentious, like too controversial concepts, which shouldn't be controversial. But again, like terms like feminism, intersectionality, I was like, I'm gonna try not to use too much these words because like some people get really triggered just with these words. And as I evolved, etc., I guess I became more and more confident in my own voice, in the fact that actually I need to use those concepts, because if we only let the people who hate them use them, then they're gonna continue removing the meaning of those words that are so important and that have such a huge history, etc. But yeah, it was really important for me to be as educational as possible, and also to draw more people towards my values, progressive values. So I guess that would be the two main objectives, and I feel like I've done that since the beginning, and I'm still looking to continue doing that in the future.
Do you have any plans in terms of like changing the format or like adding different formats, anything like that you have in mind?
I thought about it multiple times, like having longer format, or maybe doing videos in French as well, because that was, people used to, less now, but like for a long time, like people would ask me to make videos in French. They said, oh, the French media landscape doesn't have that sort of content, so it would be great if you could do that. I was like, yeah, I'm probably going to do that, but at the moment, just the way I do things work very well for me in terms of like time management, because obviously like this is a full-time job, like, running a channel. making videos, etc. So I don't feel like I have the time and space to experiment at the moment. But I've always been drawn to creating longer format or things like that. But I guess maybe a part of me is also conscious of the fact that as years go by, YouTube becomes more and more specific in terms of their expectation towards creators. So I feel like now more than ever, you have to develop your brand, and it has to be like super duper specific. If you start to do things that are kind of outside of your usual topics, if you change the format, long videos, short videos, etc., they don't really like that. So at the same time, like, because it is my job, I have to be kind of take that into account, obviously. So I guess these are maybe the two reasons why I don't really have time or space to experiment. And also, like, YouTube as a platform is quite specific in terms of what its expectations with creators.
You do have time to write a book, though. So
yeah, I was burned out.
How many years did that take to write in parallel with what you're doing on YouTube?
I was doing a lot, actually. So, to be fair, no. Like, I had just finished my work in Ireland, so I had some free time. I was working on the channel all by myself, editing, doing all the admin, blah, 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 making the videos. And, I started writing this book. It was in April, I believe, May. And it took a little bit less than a year to write the book. Which for me was not enough time. I'm still very happy with the book. I'm very proud of what I've achieved. But I feel like if I had more time, maybe I would have gone a bit more in depth. But at the same time, whenever I say that to authors, they say, yeah, but like we all say the same thing, We all wished we had more time, even like to do
that feeling
for
that doesn't go away kind of thing, yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's the sort of perfectionism, of like, if only I had like 3 more years, but no, you won't have them. Like,
I would assume you have the same feeling about every single video you post, don't you?
Oh my gosh, yes. It's an awful feeling. And I'm sure you share that feeling too. It's like you put out a video and you're like, I could have done so much better with the edits here. Oh my gosh, I could have done a better intro, or I could have changed this sentence, or like, this bit is too long, or all those like little technical stuffs where it's like, if only I had more time. And I feel like the frustration I get the most, and I'm sure you share those same feelings and frustration, is that people will judge you on that final product, and it's like, it's your final product. And then sometimes I'll see comments and I'm like, I know, I also wanted to talk about that, but I can't make like a 3 hours long video about this or that topic. So obviously there are some things that I won't cover. And it's kind of also your job, like, to go in the comments, to add value to this video. Like, that's why I always end my videos with the conversation continues in the comment section, because it's true, like, if I make some mistakes, if there are some things that I said that are wrong in your opinion, if you don't agree with what I said, if you want to add something new, just go in the comments and say what you have to say, as long as it's not like insults or hate or any of that. Like, as long as it's constructive and educational and valuable, like, please do go in this comment section.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, like you're saying, I can't make a 3-hour video to do this, but like, even if you made a 3-hour video, you would probably bring up more things that you're like, I wish I could go more in depth. Like, the longer the video, the more topics you're going to bring up, and like the more kind of open routes you would have to like make this even longer. So it's literally never enough. You never have the time that you would like to have. I'm curious because I didn't really plan on talking about this, but I've noticed a pattern when I make a video, which I haven't made that many so far, but it's been super consistent with all of my videos. I go through the same phases with, like, before making the video, I have an idea for what it's going to be, but it just feels too daunting. I don't really know how I'm going to start it, like where to start with. Then I get over that and I start working on the video, and I'm like happy with the script, and like my enthusiasm starts to go slowly go up. And then as I start to see like the big, like I've shot the video, I'm starting to edit, it's starting to actually feel like it's getting close to being done. My enthusiasm reaches a crescendo, and then I go to bed that day, like after thinking, yeah, this is going to be the best video I've made. And I wake up the next morning and enthusiasm is gone, and I'm like second guessing every single choice I've made. And I'm like, no one is going to like this. This is terrible. Everyone is going to criticize the fact that I didn't bring this and that and that and that. I can't do it now. It's too late. I like the choices that I made were in the foundations, and there's no way I can go back and redo it from scratch. And then I just push through that feeling, finish the video, and by the time I finish it, it's like at a medium level of enthusiasm where it's like it's good enough to put out, and we'll have to make do with that. And it's funny because I had that feeling before there were, like, on my first video, I already had that feeling before there were any expectations or any like audience pressure or anything like that. I already went through all of those steps, and it's been the same exact pattern for every single video. And I'm wondering if that's just me or if you have the same one as well.
No, it's not just you. I wouldn't say I have as many variations as you do. For me, usually it's I have an idea for a video and I'm like, my God, I'm such a genius. Like, this is such a good idea. Wonderful. Then I start doing the research and I get like this sort of rise of enthusiasm, as you say. Then usually what happens is like because usually the process goes quite fast because I post a video every 2 weeks max.
As a part of answering that question, can you walk me through the process, how you choose your topic, like where you get your ideas from, how you choose this is going to be my next video, the research process, the fact-checking process, all the way to the finished product?
So I have like a Notion page with all video ideas, all the video ideas that I have. Sometimes some ideas will sit there for a little while and I'll wait till I have like some sort of media momentum, a trend, an internet trend that I felt would be relevant to, you know, connect to that topic I want to talk about. So that's one way of doing it. Or the other way of doing it is just there's an internet trend that I see and I'm like, oh, I could talk about this, and I didn't think about it in the past. It's just like, oh yeah, all of a sudden like things connect. So this is when, like, as I was saying, like there's a lot of enthusiasm there because like there's that connection that is made. You know, usually it's like the concept I want to talk about or like the general idea that I want to have and the sort of trend, like the medium I'm going to use to convey that. So yeah, the little bit of enthusiasm there, and then I start doing the research. Usually what I do when I do it properly, because sometimes I'm kind of rushing things, but it's okay. So when I do it very properly, I devote like one day and a half to just reading articles, trying to get as much secondary sources or just academic work in general on that topic to kind of open up my knowledge on that topic in particular. Sometimes I have someone to help me do that process as well, kind of collect the sort of information. And then once I feel like I have something, I start writing. I know some people don't do that, but like I start writing quite quickly, even if it's not good enough, because like usually sometimes I find that it helps to create those connections. So even though I know that what I'm writing is not necessarily very good or that there's not like a groundbreaking idea or hot take or whatever, I'll still write to help make those connections. Sometimes I reach a point where it's like the enthusiasm just drops and I'm like, nah, this is actually quite bad. Like this, I don't know, like I shouldn't even make a video about it. Like it's not good or whatever. So if I really feel like it's bad, I just leave it on the side. It has happened a few times. But if I feel like it's more about like not finding the right angle or anything, I'll go back to reading, researching, etc. That's usually the way I find a new angle. And usually when that happens, I go read things that are completely unrelated to the topic, or I feel like they could be related, and that's usually how I find like those cool little angles. So that's the writing step, I guess. Then once everything is written, unfortunately I don't have like a ton of time to reread. Usually what I do is just like check that all the information is correct, that I read out loud to make sure that it sounds kind of decent, and then go straight to filming. And then someone now works for me as an editor, so he's in charge of also fact-checking a little bit. He usually fact-checks what I say, which is great, because sometimes there are still mistakes that I didn't notice. And then, yeah, the video is ready to go. Then it's all like the final touches of like posting it, making sure everything is good, doing the thumbnails, all those little things that do take a lot of time, actually. My least favorite part is probably filming, because there's always some issues with the audio, with the video, etc. And because I move a lot, I travel quite a bit. It's always a new setting. So yeah, there's a little bit of issues with that usually. My favorite part is definitely the research. Reading, getting to learn about a bunch of things, connecting ideas, having those moments where, you know, like when you write an essay, for example, it's like all of a sudden it clicks and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm such a genius. I had such the best idea possible. I know how to connect all those ideas. I know how to make a great piece. So that's those moments, like this is what I love so much about like my job is like those moments where you create connections that maybe someone else didn't see, and now you're the first person like making that sort of connection. Yeah.
It's funny because sometimes it's the other way around, where it's like you're trying to like build a case for something or make an argument, and in the writing process you kind of reach a fork in the road where you're like, okay, this section leads perfectly into either this topic or that topic.
Yeah.
And I can take one or the other, but it's going to be nearly impossible, regardless of which one I take. It's going to be very, very hard to circle back to the other topic. And they're both really important, but I need to choose which one I cover. And that can be really frustrating sometimes. Do you have, where do you get your feedback from? Is it just the comments or your audience, or do you sometimes go to professionals or expert on this and say, hey, either before or after the video, like, what do you think of this? Like, how could I have made it better? How do you gauge kind of the counterweight to the ego that you were talking about earlier?
So I'm very lucky again, because I have a lot of friends who are interested in the topics I'm interested in, which is probably the reason why we're friends, to be honest. But so usually what I do is that, like, I have conversations with them. So I'm very open about talking about what I talk about in my videos, to kind of just have conversations with them, like, but also to kind of get their feedback before I even start writing the script or anything. I'm like, hey, like, I'm working on this, or like, just, hey, what do you think about this? Like, sometimes they come up with very good ideas, and I make sure to credit them in my videos when they do. But yeah, that's usually how it happens. And it was the same with the book. When I was writing my book, like, there were like 3-4 months that were really, really intense, when I was writing like many, many hours per day. And I was at my dad's in the countryside, and my sister was there as well. And I would constantly talk to her. And I said sorry so many times, because I was like, I'm just like, it must be so frustrating to be around me at this time of the whole process, because it's just me in my brain with my little notebook, and just like talking to her about like, oh, what do you think about this or that? And so that's one way I get kind of feedback before I even start writing or researching. And then, yeah, obviously the comments, even though I tend to not look at them as much as I used to, because there's a lot of hate in the, like, as a female content creator as well, like, you get a lot of misogyny threats or things like that. So sometimes I just don't really look at them, which is kind of a shame. Another source of feedback for me is my Discord chat, so my Patreon community, because they've been following me for a very long time. They know me, they know my work, and even though they are considered as fans, I still ask them to be as honest as possible on the videos, what they liked, what they don't like. And I like this community as well, because I don't even need to say that, like, be honest with me. It's like, we're all in this process of, like, improving our critical thinking skills, to improving our research skills, etc., to learn more, etc., to question ourselves. So this is what the community is based on. So I can always go to them to get that sort of constructive criticism, feedback, etc. If I had more time with my videos, I would love to get researchers involved in the process, whether it's interviews, whether it's just like, hey, this is my script, like, what do you think about this? And I assume, like, it would give, like, the value, the potential of the script, the potential of the video would be like, I mean, the videos would be so much better. But unfortunately, yeah, I have those time constraints that sometimes can be a bit limiting.
Sorry, I was being distracted by a couple of comments in chat. So you've made a few videos that were commenting more on capitalism, and one of them is asking about why you don't make more in-depth commentary on economics. Do you feel like that's something that you're qualified to do? Or
I guess my way of doing things on YouTube is to kind of, I don't want to be too pragmatic in terms of, like, so usually what I do is, like, I analyze an issue, or I look at a specific problem, issue, social issue usually, and eventually give solutions, but more in a vision type of way. Like, hey, maybe we should go in this direction. Or maybe usually, like, my goal, I guess, with the videos is to kind of approach a topic that is usually approached in a certain way, and kind of be like, hey, you can look at this in this way, and that can lead to this and that. And if you really want to go into it, then you can take part in this or take part in that. That's usually what I do. It's like, change your mind on this. This is what people do. Do you want to do that too? But I wouldn't I remember doing a video once. It was on housing, and I got a bit more technical in that one, but using more figures, using more stats, using more, sounding more practical, I guess. And first of all, like, people were a bit confused as to why I was doing that, because they were like, "Oh, usually you're more like abstract, you're more like focusing on ideas, etc." So I guess maybe that's what I'm better at, like just ideas, visions, empowering people, but in a social justice type of way, not in a self-development. Because I used to, before I studied YouTube, before I went into humanities, etc., I had my phase where I was like really, really into like self-help, reading self-help. Like, I was still very critical about it. I was not like really buying into it like intensely, but I was still drawn to this thing of like personal development, etc. And I feel like maybe it has been a strength of mine as well on the YouTube scene, being able to use what I've learned in those spheres of like self-development, etc., in a way that, empower people, like create those feelings that want to kind of encourage people to take action, take part in social justice through that more like personal self lens. Like, what do you feel? Do you feel like this is right? Do you feel like, no, it's not right, therefore maybe you should do this or you should do that? So I guess that's sort of my approach of what I do and how I'm trying to, again, like, draw people towards like progressive values. I won't use facts, graphs or anything like that as much as maybe more traditional journalism would do.
Yeah, and animating data, like visualizing data visually on screen in a video is incredibly not just hard to like figure out how you're going to do it, but unbelievably time consuming if you want to make it look okay, like actually look digestible. And that is something that makes it like, it's much easier to just say, hey, let's talk about abstract ideas and not have to spend like an entire week on an After Effects
and just write a concept on the screen, like gently appears and disappears, and like this is so much easier. But again, like, it's always interesting to me when people come to me saying, hey, why don't you do this, or why don't you do that, or why don't you try this aesthetic, or like this way of talking, or this or that. There's this temptation to be like, oh yeah, like this is working very well, so maybe I should do like this creator. But I'm very happy with what I do, because I know that basically we're all communicating, like on the video essay sphere, like the left-wing video essay sphere. We're all communicating and we all stand for the same values, but we'll communicate them in different ways. And that's what I love about like this sort of sphere that some people call it breadtube. Basically it's left-wing YouTube. Is that we're all kind of reaching to different audiences. We all have our strengths and our weaknesses, and I feel like despite the structure of YouTube that is very much about this is the right recipe and you need to follow this recipe in order to be successful, I feel like we should resist that. If our goal is really to bring people closer to progressive values, to share those values with as many people as possible, then we should resist that and make sure that we keep our core identity, we keep what makes us special in order to draw more people to those causes. I know, for example, that because of the way I look, because of the way I talk, I present, I tend to attract liberal audiences, or even people more on the right side of the political spectrum who don't necessarily agree with what I say, but at least they will listen because I present this way. And I know that for other creators on the left-wing video essay sphere, the way they present, the fact that, for example, like they have blue hair, or that they're trans.
I was going to ask what you meant by the way you present, but you mean like you don't have a nose piercing, you don't have blue hair and stuff like that.
Exactly.
It makes you more accessible. Yeah.
I look very liberal, like in the way I dress, in the way I present, in the way I talk, in the sort of topics that I tackle, and that's something I know, and that I want to use for good, like even the topic I choose to talk about. Usually I choose topics that don't look or sound very political when you look at it. Slow living, that girl, all those trends that aren't political at all. But I'm the person like coming here and being like, hey, you see those values that are kind of part of this trend.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, everything is political. That's sort of, I know this is so annoying, and people sometimes are just like, let us just enjoy this thing and stop like turning everything into politics. But I'm like, no. I'm here to tell you the contrary. So I guess that's that would be my identity online, drawing more liberal audiences towards more radical values, I would say. And if I succeed at that, then I'm really happy. So
you said we could extend it to like an hour and a half at most. Is that a hard stop or?
Yeah, I guess if quarter past would be
Quarter past
good
10?
if that's okay with you.
Okay,
yeah.
let's try to let me try to speed it up then. Because what I was saying before about like the fork in the road when you're writing very much applies to interviewing as well. And there's something that you brought up earlier that I was hoping you would bring up again so I can ask the question about it, which is that idea of whether it's using certain terms in your contents because you don't want to alienate. For example, in my case, I don't want to be preaching to the choir, but I'm also, I don't want to be overly middle of the road in the way that I talk about things. I do want to very much clearly state what my views are on a topic, but it's always hard to find like the right, not sending signals that will completely alienate anyone that doesn't already agree with you. And I guess it's the same with when you were talking about your own personal aesthetic. And I was wondering, because earlier you said that you ended up choosing to use a lot of terms that are political and divisive. Do you draw a line there where you will kind of try to navigate them in a certain way? For example, if you're like using the term but putting it in a context that makes it more accessible to people who aren't already familiar with it, or anything like that?
Yeah, that definitely changed over time. What you describe is definitely something that I try to apply as much as I can. The fact that that's something I discovered like as I was doing it, and I was kind of naive in the sense that I thought that it doesn't matter who I am. If my argument is strong enough, if my way of communicating is good enough, then people will maybe agree with me, change their mind, etc. But then when I started to receive like very, very nasty comments of usually men, I realized that just the fact, for example, that I'm a woman is already something that is political for some people. So just me sharing my opinion as a woman is political. I guess that was the moment where I was like, I'm going to be a bit more bold with the terms that I use, and I'm going to stop like worrying about, maybe I'm alienating this or that person. So I guess the strength again of the way I present as well can be also a strength because, again, like I don't have the blue hair. So when I talk about feminism, people will take me more seriously, which is kind of sad, but it's a sad reality. So I can still use that to my advantage, and I'm doing it. So usually my strategy is to, if I'm going to use something like intersectionality or something like that, I want to use it at the end after I do like all the argumentation. And then it's at the end when people are supposed to be convinced by that, because it's like you've done all the work before that. I still don't use those concepts or those words if it's not like super duper necessary. But again, I'm always frustrated when I do that because I'm like, this should not be, like this term should not be political. Like we should be able to talk about this. We should be able to talk about that. So I guess it's a combination of using the fact that I don't look like the woke, as they say. The idea of like the social justice warrior, I don't look like that, so that's an advantage that I have. Just finding that sort of balance. But I guess it's the same for you. Like it's a constant. Because what I found very funny is that sometimes I'll get comments of people being like, "I love the fact that you're so nuanced and like you really look at all the sides and everything." And then on the other hand, you have people saying, "Oh, she's a feminazi," or she's like. So it's very interesting to see, like, depending on the political spectrum, some will see my videos as very nuanced, and I try to make them nuanced. But again, as you said earlier, I have my own opinions. There's a message I want to share at the end. It's very clear that I want to bring people towards progressive values. So this is my goal ultimately: share information in a way that is kind of promoting those values. But yeah, like. It's interesting to me to see how certain people will see it as nuanced and others will see it as, no, this is like feminazi content, super woke or whatever. It's just...
I had the same problem in the comments of my video on French politics specifically, where I would get people saying that, oh, this is so unfair to Macron. Other people saying that the entire video was glazing Macron. Other people said that I was like a neoliberal shill. Other people saying that I was obviously far left. And it's like, they can't all be right, can they? Like, and it's kind of the reason why after a while you kind of disconnect from the negative comments. For a negative comment to get your attention, it needs to reach a certain level of a reasonableness and like bringing up specific issues before you actually start to take it seriously, because you get what, especially when your videos are getting like hundreds of thousands of views, you're getting so many of them every single minute that it's kind of hard to like, you can't even process it. So someone in chat earlier was saying that what you were saying about not reading comments as much sounded like you were shielding yourself from criticism, but like, and maybe you wanna address that, but like what I would tell to that person is like, well, it's, if you're literally getting like 10 comments an hour that are criticizing things that, especially like what the examples that I was giving about my friend's video was like, they're criticizing you in mutually exclusive, contradictory ways from every single side possible. It's not shielding yourself from criticism to just go, okay, I'm not even going to listen to those anymore because it's so schizophrenic that it doesn't even make any sense anymore.
It's like this, I would say like it's just as much as we have our ideas, but we still want to, look at all the angles and make sure that we produce something that is still nuanced. I guess the looking at comments and looking at criticism is the same. It triggers the same thing, right? It's like, I want to look at them because, I want to see the criticism, and there are constructive criticism in there. I want to, even like, just things like your audio is bad in this video, like that's still useful. So I want to look at that, and I wish it was just that, or I wish YouTube as a platform would do a better job at filtering all the hate, threat. I talk a lot about that with other female content creators, but we don't really talk about this publicly that much. We get like a bunch of different threats, like from death to other things like rape or things like that. So it's just like, like when you know that this is possible, that you're going to see this in the comments, there's this sort of survival impulse of like not looking at it. I hate myself sometimes for looking at comments, because I see things that are, kind of worrisome. But as you said, you sort of build this sort of insensitivity where you reach a point where sometimes you see insults or things like that and it doesn't affect you anymore. But after a while, like when you have to see that all the time, all day, multiple times a day, it's like it does have an effect on you. And I noticed it several times where, for example, one of my videos will go viral. If it's something related to feminism, it's even worse. I'll see like people who are orchestrating all those sort of bullying, hate, harassment campaigns on Twitter. And I know this because they usually come in blocks and they all have the same, it's always the same thing. So someone can told them to say something on Twitter and then they come into the comment section. It's just like, for example, like a week ago, one of my old videos on why positive, healthy masculinity is overrated kind of gained momentum again. And I knew even before it started to gain momentum that I was not going to look at the comment, because anything that is related to feminism, I did a video on passport bros as well. Like on those videos, it's just like, and it's interesting because like when people go on the videos, they don't see those comments because like they don't go up. Like the comments that go up are like the ones that have a lot of likes, etc.
Yeah.
So they don't see it.
You see the notifications for them. Yeah.
We see it. We see it every time we go on YouTube Studio. We see like the little section down there with all the comments. So even if you try your best not to look at it,
the automatically hidden the comments that YouTube automatically hid away, like do you actually go and click into looking to those? Because those can be pretty spicy as well.
No, I don't. But I guess there are many ways to seek criticism, to find it. And it's okay if that criticism is coming from people who cannot agree with you in some aspects. I think that's something I'm getting more and more comfortable with, the fact that I don't need to ask a far-right advocate what they think about my video. Like, it's okay. Mm-hmm. I'm not even trying to reach out to them. At least like I could ask like a liberal, a centrist what they think about it, maybe someone who's right-wing, because I would actually care about what they think about the video. So I guess that's sort of my mentality now around criticism. It's okay to not receive all the criticism in the world and to hear about everyone's opinion on your video. If at least you have like a sort of enough variety, enough a spectrum of people you can trust and are not going to tell you that criticism in very harsh ways. Like, I guess, that's my way of viewing it.
So you just wrote this book, Collapse Feminism. I know what feminism means, I know what collapse means, but what do you mean by collapse in the context of feminism?
I got the idea of collapse because I was starting to look at a French researcher actually, who's called Pablo Servigne. He's very popular in the climate sort of sphere, climate movement, etc. And he wrote a book about like the collapse of civilization, and it was very, very like the sort of doomism that I'm kind of like, oh God, no, not again. So yeah, and more than his book, it was more like this whole movement of we're all doomed anyway. The world is going to collapse, and the sort of religiosity around it as well. It's like we, as a species, like this is going to be our collective punishment, you know. So yeah, I was interested in that framework and how the sort of impact it has on social media and who actually subscribe to doomerism, to this sort of collapse framework. Because like when you look at it, really, it's mostly powerful people who kind of spread this idea that the world is going to end, you know, like the Elon Musk or like we need to build a city on Mars or that sort of thing. Some people can't afford to think about the end of the world. Like it's just what's going to happen to them. So the idea with the book was to kind of use this framework, see how the sort of impact it has on social media, how collapse is very connected to conservative ideas, because like in terms of crisis, this time of fears, you tend to turn in on yourself, family, the things you already know, so backwards, you know, the sort of, I mean, we see it very clearly in Europe with the rise of fascism, etc. That was the framework, but then the idea was to infuse a little bit of hope in there, to look at all the wonderful work that is done by mostly marginalized people who can't afford to believe in collapse, because they have to believe that the future is going to be bright, that tomorrow is going to be better than today, because the situation they are in today is a situation for some of survival. So yeah, I wanted to seek inspiration in those people, in those marginalized communities, and all the wonderful work they do and they've done in the past. So that's Collapse Feminism, I guess.
I remember it must have been in 2021 that a census was published in the US pointing out just how much birth rates had fallen. And we're talking a lot about how North America, Europe, and some Asian countries, birth rates are below replacement level. And I really fear that that state of affairs and the fact that people are really starting to panic, especially conservatives are starting to panic about that, will lead to first incentives to try to push people or like reward people for having more children. And eventually it's going to lead to, and we're already seeing this, to rolling back abortion rights, rolling back contraceptive rights and all of that. And to me, really a strong sign that it's starting to, well, I mean, first of all, you look at Poland and they have an incentive program to incentivize births, and they have also rolled back abortion rights in recent years. But even if you look at like Western European countries, a very recent example of that was the rhetoric from Emmanuel Macron a few days ago, which was the demographic rearmament term that he used, which to me, as soon as I heard that, I thought of the what's called the battle for births in fascist Italy. I don't know if you're familiar with the term.
No,
but
no.
It was an entire part of the Mussolini fascist government to incentivize birth with this kind of like martial terminology associated to it. Basically, like we need a bigger population to have more people in the army and all of that. I don't want to put thoughts into or intentions into Macron's head that he didn't necessarily have himself, but that phrase demographic rearmament really echoed that, and I was wondering what you thought about it.
I mean, we've seen it like the idea of giving benefits or like rewarding women who have babies has grown recently. Like you have Vladimir Putin's with his title, like a Soviet Union title, the superheroine, that would give like a specific like national reward to women who have 10 kids. Then you have Éric Zemmour in France, so like the far right of the far right. I think one of his measure during the campaign was to give 10,000 euros to for every kid born in rural areas or something like that. So there are things that are pushed forward, that are being done. What scares me the most about this is how that sort of conservative pro-family incentive merges with more, like left-wing social concerns. So like one way, for example, is like, promoting, giving like longer maternity leave, awarding, giving money to mothers. So it's sort of, hey, like, we are going to reward you with money. We are going to provide, we are going to support you as a nation, as a state in that process. And this sort of connection between a pro-family, so more like conservative right-wing agenda, and a social benefits, giving money from the state, supporting people. agenda, this is kind of scary, because in my opinion, like that can be one way where on the left, like we can flip into this sort of conservative, and there are many leftists who believe that the role of a woman in a society is to make babies for the revolution, make babies to ensure that the nation remains strong. Like it's not necessarily it can exist on the left as well. For example, like during my master's degree, I worked on the Black Panther Party, and they're great in many ways. But there was this section of the Black Panther Party that was kind of like, they were very, very skeptical about abortions, for example. And they were kind of right in a way, because a lot of, I'm not going to go too much in depth, but there were a lot of eugenists who created little clinics in Black neighborhoods to kind of regulate birth, etc. But their motivation was very, eugenistic. It was like anti-Black. So that was racism. So that's where the skepticism came from. But still, you kind of had this idea of like making babies for the revolution. So using women's womb for that process. So I guess you still kind of see it. You definitely see it with Macron's new scheme of like demographic rearmament, which is very scary. And his whole strategy of like using the language of the far right in hope of countering them is, I'm not going to say interesting, but like it's definitely something. It says a lot about like the direction we're going and how those things are kind of normalized. I think like what scares me the most with Macron is like where he started, the way he presented himself before his first mandate, and where he is now. And that's sort of evolution, which is the topic of my next video again, but like more on like the feminist side of it. The way he moves from liberal to, like using the idea of the far right, like this is kind of scary to me. And this is kind of scary because I see how this can be repeated in many other spheres, in many other contexts, with the Great Replacement theory, for example. Like we've seen how this idea that used to be considered as a conspiracy theory, so that wouldn't be really talked about on mainstream media, is now becoming more and more acceptable. And it's interesting to look at who are the people who are actually platforming those ideas, or using them as a valid framework from which to think, to theorize, to make TV shows, And I'm not talking about like the conservative TV channels. I'm talking about like, public founded TV channels. There was a video made by Usul, so he's a French streamer, creator, left-wing creator. He talked about like this show. I can't even remember the name of the journalist, the female journalist, who's supposed to be a liberal, on many aspects. But like she completely used the framework of the far right around this idea of the Great Replacement. And this show that she built, the message throughout the show is, there are too many Black babies, or like these Black women make too many babies, and they're all coming to France, and like, oh my gosh, like we need to do something about it, And it's insane, like how over time, like what is considered as centrism, what is considered as neutral, acceptable, changes from left to right. And I guess now, like we're more on that sort of overtone window. We're drifting more onto the right side of it. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I honestly, if we didn't have a time limit, I feel like this could go on for another couple of hours. So, because there's a lot of stuff that
we'll have to do another one, I guess.
We could do another one some other time. But thank you so much for coming on, and thank you so much for taking the time, even ahead of the live stream, for like all the setting up that we did. And I will let you go. So have a good evening.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it was a great chat. And I definitely want to talk with you again, because I was listening to the first part as well, and I was like, oh my gosh, this person is very interesting. I want to learn more. So I guess we'll stay in touch, and maybe we'll do another one as well. So yeah.
Sounds good. Let's definitely do another one sometime soon.